The coffee pot trembled in Rachel Martinez's hand, sending ripples across the dark surface. 4 men in charcoal suits stood just inside the doorway of Betty's diner, their polished shoes catching the weak afternoon sunlight that filtered through the grease-filmed windows. Outside, a black Mercedes idled at the curb, its engine purring like something from another world entirely. Rachel had seen plenty of strange things in her 3 years slinging hash at Betty's. She'd seen fistfights over the last piece of pecan pie. She'd seen marriage proposals that ended in tears and coffee thrown in faces. She'd even seen a man try to pay his tab with a handful of Subway tokens and a sincere apology. But she had never seen this. The tallest man stepped forward, his eyes scanning the red vinyl booths, the chipped Formica counters, the yellowing menus tucked behind the napkin dispensers. His gaze landed on her name tag, and something shifted in his expression. Recognition, maybe? Or pity? In exactly 17 minutes, Rachel Martinez would discover that 9 months of $5 bills had bought her something worth $8 million. But in that moment, all she knew was fear. The kind that started in your stomach and crawled up your throat like something alive. Miss Martinez? The man's voice was careful, measured, professional. We need to talk about Eleanor Patterson. The name on Rachel's student loan statement mocked her every month. $47,000. 2 semesters of nursing school, cut short when her mother collapsed in the produce aisle of an H-E-B grocery store. The stroke had been massive, sudden, merciless. One moment her mother was squeezing avocados. The next she was on the floor, her left side already going numb. That was 14 months ago. The hospital bills arrived like a slow-motion avalanche. $12,000, then $8,000, then another $15,000 for the rehabilitation facility her mother needed, but insurance wouldn't fully cover. Rachel had dropped out of school before the spring semester even started. Her dreams of scrubs and stethoscopes dissolving like sugar in hot coffee. Now her universe had shrunk to the dimensions of Betty's diner. 42 feet from the kitchen door to the front entrance. 18 red vinyl booths, half of them with torn upholstery that caught on customers' jeans. A counter with 12 stools that squeaked when anyone over 200 pounds sat down. This was it. This was everything. Her morning routine never varied. 3 alarms on her phone, each one louder than the last, because one wasn't enough to pull her from the heavy sleep of exhaustion. Instant coffee in a chip mug. No sugar because sugar costs money. Then the ritual she dreaded most. Opening her banking app and watching the numbers tell their brutal truth. $247. $189. Once gloriously for $112, until rent was due and it dropped to $67. The eviction notice lived in her apron pocket, folded into a small square that pressed against her hip like a secret tumor. 30 days to pay $1,100 in back rent or find somewhere else to live. She'd read it so many times the paper had gone soft, the words blurring at the creases. Her shoes told their own story. Black non-slip sneakers she'd bought 2 years ago, now held together with duct tape along the seams where the rubber had separated from the canvas. She'd reinforced the insoles with cardboard from cereal boxes, cutting them to fit, replacing them when they wore through. Phil, the manager, treated complaints like a hobby. The coffee was too weak. The coffee was too strong. Why was table 7 still dirty? Why did it take 4 minutes to get someone's eggs? His face was perpetually red, his voice perpetually raised, as if the diner's mediocrity was a personal insult he had to avenge hourly. Monica, her co-worker, had perfected the art of judgment delivered through silence. The way she looked at Rachel's taped shoes, the way she counted her tips at the end of each shift, making sure everyone knew when she'd had a good day, the way she rolled her eyes whenever Rachel took extra time with the elderly customers or the ones who seemed lost. And the customers themselves? Most looked through Rachel like she was glass. They ordered, ate, paid, left. She was a function, not a person. A mechanism that brought food and cleared plates. When she smiled, they didn't smile back. When she asked how their day was going, they stared at their phones. Betty's diner wasn't just where Rachel worked. It was where she disappeared. The first Thursday Eleanor Patterson walked through the door, Rachel was wiping down table 4 for the 3rd time, trying to remove a stubborn coffee ring that had probably been there since the Clinton administration. The bell above the entrance chimed its tinny announcement. Rachel looked up and saw an old woman standing just inside, blinking as her eyes adjusted from the bright Austin sunshine to the diner's dim interior. She was small, maybe 5'2", with silver hair pinned back in a style that belonged to a different era. Her navy cardigan had seen better decades, frayed at the cuffs, one button replaced with another that didn't quite match. But it was the way she carried herself that caught Rachel's attention. A careful dignity, shoulders back despite the slight stoop of age, chin level even though everything about her screamed exhaustion. Eleanor chose booth 7, the one by the window that looked out onto South Congress Avenue. She slid into the seat with the slow precision of someone whose bones hurt. When Rachel approached with a menu, Eleanor's hands trembled as she reached for it. Not the shake of nerves, but something deeper. Medical, permanent. Chamomile tea, please, Eleanor said, her voice barely above a whisper. And wheat toast. No butter. Rachel noticed everything in the 30 seconds it took to write down the order. The medical alert bracelet peeking out from beneath Eleanor's sleeve. The kind that meant serious conditions and emergency contacts. The wedding ring, gold worn thin, still circling her finger like a promise kept long after promises should have expired. The bus schedule she pulled from her purse, routes highlighted in 3 different colors, blue, green, yellow, transfers marked with tiny stars. When the bill came, Eleanor counted out exact change. For $1.73. She counted it twice, her trembling fingers sorting pennies and dimes with the focus of someone for whom every cent was budgeted, accounted for, necessary. No tip. Rachel watched her leave, this careful old woman with her frayed cardigan and her color-coded bus schedule. Something in her chest shifted. Recognition, maybe. One struggling woman seeing another. The next Thursday, Eleanor returned. Same time, 11:47 a.m. Same order. Same exact change. This time, when Eleanor left, Rachel pulled a $5 bill from her own tips and wrapped it in a napkin. She left it on the table where Eleanor had been sitting, half hidden beneath the edge of the salt shaker. She was refilling ketchup bottles when she heard it, a small sound quickly muffled. She turned and saw Eleanor standing by the booth, the napkin open in her shaking hands, staring at the $5 bill like it was something holy. Tears tracked down her weathered cheeks. Eleanor looked up, met Rachel's eyes across the diner, and something passed between them. No words, just understanding. Eleanor wiped her face quickly, folded the bill into her purse with the kind of care you'd give a photograph, and left. The following Thursday, she came back, and the Thursday after that. The ritual became a rhythm. Eleanor ordered her tea and toast. Rachel served it. Eleanor left exact change. Rachel left $5, sometimes 10 when the morning had been good and her pocket felt a little heavier. They never spoke about it. Eleanor never said thank you, never acknowledged the money directly. But her eyes said everything. They said, I see you. They said, this matters. They said, you're keeping me alive. Monica noticed, of course. You're literally giving money to customers, she said one afternoon, watching Rachel wrap a 10 in a napkin. That's not how any of this works. But Rachel couldn't explain it, not in words Monica would understand. It wasn't charity. It wasn't pity. It was something else entirely. It was the recognition that dignity didn't depend on the size of your bank account. That being seen, truly seen, was worth more than money could measure. 9 months, 39 Thursdays. Eleanor Patterson, silent and grateful, arriving like clockwork, leaving like a ghost. Until the Thursday she didn't come. James Crawford had the kind of face that inspired confidence in courtrooms and terror in deposition rooms. Mid-50s, gray at the temples, eyes that missed nothing. He stepped forward while his 3 associates fanned out behind him like a well-rehearsed formation. Miss Martinez, I'm James Crawford of Crawford, Hayes and Associates. He reached into his jacket and produced a business card embossed with gold lettering. These are my colleagues. We're the executors of Eleanor Patterson's estate. The diner went silent. Even the ancient air conditioner seemed to hold its breath, its usual rattle fading to nothing. At table 3, a trucker with his fork halfway to his mouth froze. At the counter, an elderly man reading the Austin American Statesman lowered his paper. Phil emerged from the kitchen, wiping his hands on his permanently stained apron, suspicion radiating from every pore. He had the expression of a man who'd seen too many health inspectors. Too many people who wanted things from him he didn't want to give. "What's this about?" Phil's voice carried the edge of someone preparing for a fight. Crawford ignored him, his attention fixed on Rachel. "Miss Martinez, is there somewhere we could sit?" Rachel's legs moved without consulting her brain. She slid into booth 7. Eleanor's booth. The vinyl was still cracked in the same place, still caught the afternoon light the same way. Crawford sat across from her. His associates remained standing, a wall of expensive fabric and serious expressions. Behind the counter, Monica had abandoned all pretense of working. She stood with a dish rag in her hand, eyes wide, mouth slightly open. "Eleanor Patterson passed away 6 days ago," Crawford said. The words were gentle, but they hit Rachel like a fist. She had terminal pancreatic cancer. She died peacefully in her sleep at Seton Medical Center. Rachel's throat closed. She'd known something was wrong when Eleanor didn't come that Thursday, and then the next Thursday. But knowing and hearing were different countries entirely. "I'm very sorry for your loss," Crawford continued, "but I'm here because you're named in her will." The words didn't make sense. They were English, arranged in a grammatically correct sentence, but they might as well have been hieroglyphics. "I don't understand." Rachel's voice sounded small, distant. "She was just a customer. I barely knew her." Something that might have been a smile touched Crawford's lips. "Miss Martinez, Eleanor Patterson wasn't just a customer. She was Eleanor Patterson." He paused, watching her face. "Does the name Patterson Industries mean anything to you?" Rachel shook her head. "Patterson Industries," Crawford said slowly, "is one of the largest privately held manufacturing conglomerates in Texas. Agricultural equipment, industrial machinery, commercial real estate. Eleanor Patterson was the widow of Richard Patterson, the company's founder. At the time of her death, her personal net worth was approximately $847 million. The air left the room. Rachel heard the words, but they bounced off her brain like bullets off steel. $847 million. The number was too large to be real, too absurd to process. Eleanor, who counted pennies twice. Eleanor, who took 3 buses to get to a diner in a neighborhood where car ownership was assumed. Eleanor, whose cardigan was held together by mismatched buttons and hope. "That's not possible," Rachel whispered. She took the bus. She counted exact change. She lived like... She stopped, unable to finish the sentence. "Like someone with nothing," Crawford finished for her. "Yes, deliberately." He pulled a tablet from his briefcase, tapped the screen, and turned it toward Rachel. A photograph appeared. Eleanor, but different. Younger, maybe 65 instead of 75. Standing in front of a mansion that looked like it belonged on a movie set. Wearing a dress that probably cost more than Rachel made in a year. Her hair was darker, styled professionally, and she was smiling. "This was Eleanor 10 years ago," Crawford said. "When her husband Richard died, he left her everything. But he also left a son from his first marriage, Marcus Patterson." Crawford swiped to another photo. A man in his early 50s, handsome in the way money makes people handsome. Sharp suit, sharp features, sharp eyes that held no warmth. Marcus believed the company should be his. He contested the will. The legal battle lasted 3 years and cost both sides tens of millions of dollars. Eleanor won, but the victory destroyed something in her. Her relationship with her stepson was obliterated. The company she'd helped Richard build felt tainted. The mansion felt empty. The life she'd have felt like a lie. Crawford closed the tablet. So she left. She moved to a modest apartment in East Austin. She gave herself an allowance of exactly what a Social Security check would be. She started taking buses, shopping at thrift stores, living like the people she'd been insulated from her entire married life. Why? The question came out strangled. She was searching, Crawford said simply. For 3 years, she traveled to different cities, different diners, different churches, different grocery stores. She watched people, tested them in a way. She wanted to know if kindness still existed, if people could see past appearances, if anyone would help someone who looked like they had nothing when there was nothing in it for them. Rachel's mind spun back through the months. Every Thursday, every $5 bill, every moment she thought she was helping an old woman in need. She found a lot of cruelty, Crawford continued. people who ignored her, people who were outright cruel. In Houston, a waitress spilled soup on her deliberately. In Dallas, a store clerk followed her around like she was a thief. In San Antonio, someone tried to steal her purse while she waited for a bus. He leaned forward slightly, and then she found you. The words hung in the air like smoke. You gave her money, Crawford said. Money you needed yourself. You saw her when everyone else looked through her. You treated her dignity as if it mattered, not because you expected anything in return, but because that's who you are. Rachel couldn't speak, couldn't move. The eviction notice in her apron pocket suddenly felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Eleanor Patterson left you something. Miss Martinez. And I need you to understand that this was not a spur-of-the-moment decision. She spent 9 months observing you. She had psychiatrists evaluate her mental competency multiple times. She had every document reviewed by 3 separate law firms. What I'm about to tell you is ironclad, legal, and irreversible. Crawford opened his briefcase with a kind of precision that suggested he'd done this before, though probably never in a diner that smelled like decades of fried onions and broken dreams. He pulled out a folder, leather-bound, embossed with a law firm's name Rachel couldn't focus on long enough to read. Let's start with the liquid assets, Crawford said, opening the folder to the first page. His voice was steady, professional, the voice of someone delivering news that would change lives. Eleanor has left you a direct cash inheritance of $150,000. The funds are currently held in an escrow account and can be transferred to an account of your choosing within 72 hours. Rachel's hands started shaking. $150,000. She could pay her student loans, her mother's medical bills, back rent. She could breathe. For the first time in 14 months, she could breathe. But Crawford wasn't finished. He turned to the second page. Eleanor also purchased the property and building that houses Betty's Diner approximately 6 months ago. The deed is in her name. As of this morning at 9 a.m., ownership transferred to you. The property is valued at $890,000. It's yours, free and clear. No mortgage, no liens, no encumbrances. Across the diner, Phil made a sound like he'd been punched. His face went from red to white in the space of a heartbeat. He grabbed the counter to steady himself. Rachel couldn't process it. She owned the diner, the building, the cracked vinyl booths and the squeaky stools and the ancient air conditioner. All of it. Crawford turned another page. Additionally, Eleanor established a trust fund in your name. The principal is protected, but the interest generates approximately $12,000 per month in income. This is yours for life, non-transferable, protected from creditors and legal judgments. $12,000 a month. Rachel made less than $2,000 a month at the diner. This was 6 times her current income, every month, for the rest of her life. Behind the counter, Monica dropped a plate. It shattered on the floor, the sound sharp and final. But no one moved to clean up. Finally, Crawford said, and there was something different in his voice now. Something that suggested he'd saved the biggest revelation for last. Eleanor has transferred to you 2% of her shares in Patterson Industries. The company is privately held, valued at approximately $310 million. Your 2% stake is currently worth $6.2 million. The numbers stopped making sense. They were too large, too impossible. $6.2 million, plus the trust fund, plus the property, plus the cash. The total value of your inheritance, Crawford said, his eyes meeting Rachel's, is approximately $8.3 million. The diner tilted, or maybe Rachel tilted. The air felt thin, insufficient. Her lungs forgot how to work. $8.3 million. She'd been giving $5 bills to a woman worth $847 million, and that woman had given her $8 million in return. I don't, Rachel started, but the words dissolved. What could you possibly say? I can't. You can't, Crawford said firmly. And you will. Eleanor was very specific about that. She believed you deserved this. She believed you earned it. Earned it? Rachel's voice cracked. I gave her maybe $2,000 over 9 months. This is insane. It wasn't about the money, Crawford said quietly. It was never about the money. He reached into the folder one more time and pulled out an envelope. Cream-colored, heavy paper. The kind that cost too much. Rachel's name was written on the front in shaky handwriting she recognized immediately. Eleanor's handwriting. She wanted you to have this, Crawford said, sliding the envelope across the table. It explains everything better than I ever could. Rachel's hands trembled as she picked up the envelope. It was sealed with red wax, old-fashioned, deliberate. Through the windows, the Mercedes still idled at the curb. In booth 3, the trucker had given up all pretense of eating and was openly staring. Phil leaned against the counter like a man who'd just watched his entire worldview collapse. And Monica stood frozen, her face a mixture of shock and something that looked uncomfortably like envy. Rachel broke the seal. Rachel's fingers trembled as she unfolded the paper. The handwriting was shaky but deliberate, each letter formed with the careful precision of someone who knew these might be among the last words they'd ever write. She started reading silently, but Crawford gestured gently. She wanted it read aloud, he said. If you're comfortable. Rachel swallowed hard and began. Dear Rachel, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I hope it was peaceful. I hope I didn't make too much fuss. That would be just like me, wouldn't it? Always trying not to be a burden. Rachel's voice cracked on the last word. She paused, breathed, continued. For 3 years, I looked for kindness. Real kindness, the kind that costs something. I went to 17 cities, 43 diners, countless buses, and thrift stores and places where people like me, people who looked like they had nothing, were either invisible or treated like problems to be solved. In Houston, a waitress spilled hot soup on my lap. Not an accident. She did it because I asked for water instead of ordering something expensive. In Dallas, a store manager followed me around for 20 minutes, convinced I was stealing. In San Antonio, I watched a young man help an elderly woman cross the street, then demand $20 for his trouble. Everyone failed, not because they were evil, but because they couldn't see past what I appeared to be. A poor old woman, forgettable, disposable, not worth the effort of basic human decency. Then I found Betty's Diner, and I found you. Rachel had to stop. Her throat was closing, tears blurring the words. Monica had moved closer, no longer pretending not to listen. Phil stood frozen by the kitchen door. Even the trucker at table 3 had abandoned his meal entirely. You gave me money you needed yourself. I know about your student loans, Rachel. I know about your mother. I know about the eviction notice in your apron pocket that you thought no one noticed. You were drowning, and you threw me a lifeline anyway. You saw me when I was invisible. You treated my dignity as if it mattered, not because I might reward you someday, but because that's who you are. You cut my toast into small pieces when you noticed my hands were shaking too badly to manage it myself. You always made sure the tea was hot, but not scalding. You smiled at me like I was a person, not a ghost. For 9 months, you gave me something no one else had in 3 years. You gave me hope that kindness still existed in the world. I was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer 2 weeks before I met you. Stage 4, terminal. The doctors gave me 6 to 12 months. I knew I was dying. I knew my fortune would go somewhere. Marcus had already proven himself unworthy. The charities I'd supported for years sent me glossy brochures and invitations to galas, but they never once asked how I was doing. They saw my money, never me. But you saw me. So I'm giving you what you gave me, Rachel, with interest, because what you gave me was worth more than money. You gave me dignity in my final months. You gave me proof that I hadn't wasted my life, that the world still had good people in it, that character still mattered. The money is yours. Use it wisely. Use it kindly. Use it the way you used those $5 bills, to see people others don't see, to help people others won't help, to prove that wealth means nothing without character. Marcus will fight you. He always fights. He believes money is something you deserve simply by existing, simply by being born into the right family. Prove him wrong. Show him that inheritance is earned through character, not chromosomes. What you gave me was priceless. I'm simply returning a favor. With gratitude and love, Eleanor Patterson. Rachel folded the letter carefully, her hands shaking so badly she could barely manage it. The diner was silent except for the hum of the ancient air conditioner and the distant sound of traffic on South Congress Avenue. Crawford reached across the table and placed his hand over hers. She meant every word, he said quietly. I knew Eleanor for 15 years. She was the most principled person I've ever met, and she saw something in you that the rest of the world missed. Rachel looked up at him, tears streaming down her face. I don't know if I could do this. I don't know if I'm... The diner door slammed open with a force that rattled the windows. The man who stormed through the entrance looked like he'd been assembled by a team of expensive tailors and personal trainers working in perfect coordination. Marcus Patterson wore a suit that probably cost more than Rachel made in 3 months. His salt and pepper hair was styled with the kind of precision that required daily attention. His watch caught the light and threw it back like a challenge. But it was his eyes that made Rachel's stomach drop. They burned with a fury so intense it felt physical, like heat radiating off asphalt in August. 2 lawyers flanked him, expensive briefcases in hand, expressions carefully neutral in the way that people who get paid by the hour perfect over years of practice. Crawford. Marcus's voice cut through the diner like a blade. I've been looking for you. James Crawford stood slowly, positioning himself slightly in front of Rachel. A subtle movement, but deliberate, protective. Mr. Patterson, I was planning to contact you this afternoon. Contact me? Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in it. You ambushed my family's waitress with my mother's fortune, and you were planning to contact me? He moved further into the diner, his eyes scanning the cracked vinyl booths, the water-stained ceiling tiles, the faded photographs of Austin landmarks that had been on the walls since the 80s. His lip curled. This is fraud. He pointed at Rachel without looking at her, as if she were a piece of furniture. My mother was clearly incompetent, diminished capacity, probably manipulated by this. He finally looked at Rachel, and the contempt in his eyes was like a slap. This opportunistic little waitress who saw an easy target. Rachel felt Crawford tense beside her. Your mother, Crawford said, his voice deadly calm, was evaluated by 3 separate psychiatrists over a period of 6 months. All concluded, she was of sound mind. She updated her will 4 times, each time with different legal teams reviewing the documents. Everything was filmed, notarized, and documented. The will is ironclad. Marcus turned his full attention to Crawford now, stepping close enough that they were nearly chest to chest. She was dying. She was medicated. She was vulnerable, and he let her give $8 million to a stranger. She gave it to someone who showed her more kindness in 9 months than you showed her in 54 years, Crawford said quietly. The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. His face flushed deep red. How dare you? His voice dropped to something dangerous. I'm her son, her actual son, not some pathetic waitress who probably cried on cue and played the poor me card until my mother's guilt kicked in. He finally turned to Rachel fully, looking at her the way someone might examine a bug they were about to step on. You think you can just walk into my family's fortune? You think you're going to keep millions of dollars that should have stayed in the Patterson family? He leaned closer, and Rachel could smell his cologne, expensive and overwhelming. I know exactly what you are, a parasite, a scam artist, and I'm going to prove it. Rachel found her voice, small but steady. I didn't ask for any of this. I didn't even know who she was. Convenient, Marcus sneered. The innocent act. How much did you research her before you started your little charity routine? How many times did you Google Patterson Industries before you figured out your meal ticket? I never. Save it. Marcus straightened, adjusting his suit jacket with sharp, angry movements. My lawyers will be filing a contest by close of business today. Undue influence. Diminished capacity. Fraud. We'll tie this up in probate for years. And while we're at it, we'll make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of person you are. He turned to leave, then stopped, looking back over his shoulder. Enjoy your poverty a little longer, sweetheart, because that's all you're going to have when I'm done with you. That and a legal bill you'll never be able to pay. The door slammed behind him with enough force to make the dishes rattle. The diner remained frozen for a long moment. Then Phil let out a breath that sounded like he'd been holding it for hours. Crawford sat back down slowly, his expression unchanged. If Marcus's threats had worried him, his face didn't show it. Well, he said calmly, pulling out his phone. That went about as expected. The First National Bank on West 6th Street looked like every other bank Rachel had ever walked past but never entered. Marble floors, hushed voices, the kind of quiet that money demands. Crawford led her through the main floor to a back corridor, then down a flight of stairs to the vault level. A bank officer in a crisp suit verified their identities, checked documentation, and led them to a private room. Minutes later, she returned with a safe deposit box, set it on the table, and left them alone. Crawford gestured to Rachel. Eleanor arranged for the access codes to transfer to you upon her death. This is yours now. Rachel lifted the lid with trembling hands. Inside were letters, dozens of them, each in its own envelope, each dated with precise handwriting. Crawford reached in and pulled out the first one. September 12th, the day Eleanor first came to the diner. Rachel opened it. Today, I met Rachel Martinez. She served my tea with a smile that reached her eyes. Real warmth, not the practiced kind. When she brought my toast, she noticed my hands shaking and cut it into smaller pieces without being asked. Such a small thing, but no one else has noticed in 3 years. Rachel's breath caught. She pulled out another envelope. October 3rd. Rachel gave her lunch to a homeless man today. A sandwich and an apple she'd brought from home. She told Monica she wasn't hungry, but I saw her stomach growl an hour later. She went without so someone else could eat. I wanted to cry. Another. November 17th. Monica called in sick for her daughter's school recital. Phil was furious, threatening to dock her pay. Rachel volunteered to cover the double shift, even though she'd already worked 6 days straight. When Phil wasn't looking, she smiled at Monica and said, "Go. Family matters." The kindness in her voice was genuine. Letter after letter. Eleanor had documented everything. The time Rachel slipped a 20 into an elderly man's jacket pocket when he couldn't afford his medication. The time she stayed 2 hours past her shift to help train a new hire who was struggling. The time she stood up to a customer who was berating a busboy, risking her tips, risking her job. Moments Rachel had forgotten or never thought anyone had seen. She was watching me the whole time, Rachel whispered. She was, Crawford confirmed. Eleanor believed character revealed itself in small moments. When people thought no one was looking, that's when you saw who they really were. At the bottom of the box, beneath all the letters, was a USB drive, a label in Eleanor's handwriting. For Rachel, the arsenal. Crawford's expression shifted to something harder when he saw it. She told me about this, he said quietly. I helped her compile some of it, though she did most of the work herself. He pulled out a laptop from his briefcase, inserted the drive, and turned the screen toward Rachel. Folders, dozens of them, bank statements, wire transfers, email correspondence, legal documents, all labeled with dates from 10 to 13 years ago. During the legal battle over Richard's estate, Crawford explained, Marcus fought dirty. He didn't just contest the will. He tried to destroy his stepmother's credibility, drain the company's resources, and position himself as the victim. Eleanor discovered he was embezzling, not just thousands, millions. Over 18 months, he funneled $4.7 million into shell companies and offshore accounts. Rachel stared at the screen, at the meticulous documentation of fraud laid out in spreadsheets and bank records. Why didn't she use this? She could have destroyed him. Because she still loved him, Crawford said simply. He was Richard's son, despite everything. She couldn't bring herself to send him to prison. So she kept the evidence, won the legal battle on other grounds, and gave Marcus $50 million as a settlement. She hoped the money would change him, help him start over. What happened? He burned through it in 7 years. Bad investments, expensive tastes, a lifestyle that required constant cash infusions. By the time Eleanor moved to Austin, he was broke again and blaming her for it. Crawford closed the laptop. She knew he'd contest her will. She knew he'd come after you. So she gave you this. Insurance, leverage, options. Rachel looked at the USB drive. This small piece of plastic that held the power to destroy a man's life. She wanted you to have choices, Crawford said. Eleanor believed in second chances, even for people who didn't deserve them. But she also believed in protecting the innocent. What you do with this information is up to you. Rachel's apartment felt smaller than usual that night, closing in like the walls were contracting with every passing hour. Documents covered her kitchen table, spreading across the surface like evidence of a life she didn't recognize. Bank statements with numbers that didn't feel real. Property deeds with her name typed in official fonts. trust fund paperwork that promised $12,000 a month forever. Forever. Her phone had been ringing nonstop since 4 p.m. News outlets, somehow, had gotten the story. Local stations wanted interviews. A blogger from Houston asked if she'd do a podcast. Someone from the Austin Chronicle left 3 voicemails. Monica's text came through at 7. Are you really rich now? Like rich? Call me. Phil called at 7:30. We need to talk about the diner, about my job, about what happens now. His voice had lost its usual edge, replaced by something that sounded uncomfortably like fear. Rachel ignored them all. Instead, she sat on her threadbare couch. Eleanor's letters spread across her lap and read them again. Each one a snapshot of a woman watching another woman, looking for proof that goodness still existed. On her coffee table, the eviction notice sat next to Eleanor's final letter. 24 hours ago, that piece of paper had represented her worst nightmare. Now it was just paper. She could pay it. She could pay everything. Student loans, medical bills, back rent. She could pay it all and still have millions left over. The thought should have brought relief, joy, something. Instead, she felt terrified. Because Eleanor hadn't just given her money. She'd given her a test. A different kind of test than the one Rachel had unknowingly passed at the diner. This test was about who she would become. Whether $8 million would change the person Eleanor had spent 9 months documenting. Whether wealth would corrupt the character Eleanor had valued enough to reward. Rachel thought about Marcus Patterson, his fury and his entitlement, his absolute certainty that money was something he deserved simply by existing. She thought about his threats, his sneering contempt, his promise to drag this out for years. She thought about the USB drive sitting in her purse, heavy with the power to destroy him. Eleanor had given her a choice: destroy Marcus with evidence of his crimes, or give him something Eleanor had tried to give him years ago, a chance at dignity. Rachel picked up her phone and called Crawford. I know what I want to do, she said when he answered. Crawford's office occupied the 15th floor of a building on Congress Avenue, all glass and steel and views of downtown Austin that probably cost more per month than Rachel's entire apartment. He'd assembled his team by the time she arrived. 3 people who looked like they charged by the minute and were worth every penny. Rachel Martinez, Crawford said, gesturing to each person in turn. Meet Patricia Alvarez, our litigation specialist. She's handled more estate contests than anyone in Texas. David Chun, forensic accountant. If there's money hidden somewhere, David finds it. And Sarah Williams, our PR consultant. When Marcus started calling you a gold digger on social media this morning, Sarah's the one who killed the story before it spread. Rachel hadn't even known about the social media posts. She wasn't sure if that made her grateful or more terrified. They sat around a conference table that could have seated 20. Documents covered the surface. Marcus's preliminary filing, media strategy plans, financial projections showing how long a court battle could last. Let's be direct, Patricia said. She had the kind of voice that suggested she won arguments for a living. Marcus Patterson is following a predictable playbook. Delay tactics, character assassination, death by 1,000 legal cuts. He'll drag this out until you're drowning in legal fees and desperate enough to settle for a fraction of what Eleanor left you. He's already started the media campaign, Sarah added, pulling up her tablet, calling you an opportunist, suggesting you manipulated a dying woman. He gave an interview to the Austin Business Journal this morning, painting himself as a grieving son fighting to protect his mother's true wishes. David pushed a folder toward her. We've analyzed his financial situation. He's broke. Again, he owes approximately $3.2 million to various creditors. His legal team is working on contingency, which means they're confident they can win or force a settlement. They're betting you can't afford to fight. Rachel looked at the USB drive Crawford had placed in the center of the table. But we have this, she said quietly. We do, Crawford confirmed. The question is how we use it. We can leak it to prosecutors, destroy Marcus publicly, potentially send him to prison, or we can use it as leverage, force him to the table, make him back down. Patricia leaned forward. Or we can do what Marcus would never expect. We can offer him a deal before he's even fully committed to the fight. Rachel had been thinking about this all night, Eleanor's words echoing in her mind. Character. dignity, second chances. I want to do what Eleanor would do, she said, and 4 sets of eyes turned to her. I want to give him a chance to walk away with dignity. The room went quiet. You want to offer him money? Sarah asked carefully. After everything he said to you? I want to offer him a choice, Rachel corrected. The same choice Eleanor gave me, the chance to be better than his worst impulses. Crawford leaned back in his chair, something that might have been approval crossing his face. How much? Rachel thought about 9 months of $5 bills. About giving what you couldn't afford to give because it was the right thing to do. $2 million, she said. And silence. He drops the contest. We never released the evidence. And he gets to save face. He can tell people it was a family settlement, that we worked it out privately. Patricia whistled low. That's generous. Some would say stupid. Eleanor gave him $50 million once, Rachel said, because she believed in second chances. I'm offering $2 million because I believe in them too, and because I want to sleep at night knowing I tried. And if he refuses? David asked. Rachel looked at the USB drive. Then we give the evidence to prosecutors and let justice handle it. But I want him to have the choice first. I want him to know someone tried to see him the way Eleanor saw me, as someone capable of being better. Crawford smiled, a real smile, the first she'd seen from him. Eleanor chose well, he said. The conference room at Crawford's office felt deliberately neutral, designed to strip away advantage. White walls, a rectangular table, 8 chairs evenly spaced. No windows to suggest whose territory this was. Just fluorescent lights and the hum of air conditioning and the weight of what was about to happen. Marcus arrived exactly on time, flanked by his 2 lawyers. He wore a different suit than before, navy instead of charcoal. The expression was identical. Contempt mixed with certainty. He sat across from Rachel, like a king forced to negotiate with peasants. Crawford handled the introductions with clinical precision. Marcus's lead attorney was Gerald Hoffman, silver-haired and expensive-looking. His associate, a younger woman named Jennifer Park, held a legal pad and watched Rachel with the careful attention of someone evaluating threats. Let's not waste time, Marcus said before anyone else could speak. I'm here as a courtesy. My legal position is solid. My mother was manipulated. And I have 3 psychiatrists ready to testify about the effects of terminal cancer on cognitive function and decision-making. Rachel took a breath. Crawford had coached her on this moment. But no amount of coaching could fully prepare you for looking across a table at someone who hated you. I'm not here to fight you, she said. Her voice was steady, which surprised her. I'm here to offer you something. Marcus's eyebrows rose. Offer me something? That's rich. $2 million, Rachel continued. For my inheritance. No strings attached. You drop the lawsuit, we sign a settlement agreement, and you can tell anyone who asks that we reached a private family arrangement. You save face. You walk away with money you can actually use, and we both move on. For a moment, Marcus just stared at her. Then he laughed. It started as a chuckle and built into something louder, harsher, filling the conference room with its ugliness. $2 million. He leaned back in his chair, shaking his head. My mother was worth $847 million when she died. You inherited $8 million of that, and you think I'm going to accept $2 million and walk away? It's a generous offer, Crawford said quietly. It's an insult. Marcus leaned forward now, his eyes locked on Rachel. I want half of what you got, minimum, for $1 million. And honestly, that's me being nice. I could argue for all of it. I'm her actual son. You're a stranger who manipulated a dying woman. That's not what happened, Rachel said. That's exactly what a jury will think happened when I'm done. Marcus smiled, and it was the coldest thing Rachel had ever seen. Here's what's going to happen. My team will file motion after motion. Discovery requests, depositions, appeals. We'll drag this out for 3, maybe 4 years. Every month, your legal bills will climb. 50,000, 100,000. Eventually, you'll be so buried in debt that you'll beg me to accept a settlement. And when that day comes, I'll offer you pennies on the dollar. He stood, buttoning his suit jacket with sharp, precise movements. You think you have resources? I have unlimited resources. I have time. I have patience. And I have the law on my side. Family members contest wills every day and win, especially when some nobody waitress tries to steal what rightfully belongs to. Rachel slid the USB drive across the table. It made almost no sound, just a soft whisper against the wood. But it stopped Marcus mid-sentence, as effectively as if she'd fired a gun. "What's that?" His voice had changed just slightly, the confidence cracking around the edges. "Evidence," Rachel said simply. "Your stepmother kept very detailed records." David Chun, the forensic accountant, opened his laptop without ceremony. He'd done this before, Rachel realized. Walk someone through the map of their own crimes with the detached precision of a surgeon showing x-rays of inoperable cancer. "Mr. Patterson," David began, turning the screen so Marcus could see. "Between March 2013 and September 2014, during your legal contest of your father's will, you embezzled $4.7 million from Patterson Industries." The color drained from Marcus's face, so fast Rachel thought he might faint. David clicked through folders, each one opening to reveal spreadsheets, bank statements, email threads. "You created 3 shell companies: Apex Solutions, Meridian Consulting, and Sterling Advisory Group, all registered in Delaware with you as the beneficial owner, though hidden behind layers of corporate structure." Marcus's lawyer Hoffman leaned forward, his expression shifting from confident to concerned. "These companies billed Patterson Industries for services never rendered," David continued, his voice never wavering. "Consulting fees, advisory services, market research. The invoices were approved by you in your capacity as interim board member. The funds were then transferred to offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands and Switzerland." Click. Another folder opened. Wire transfer records, each one highlighted and annotated. March 15, 2013. $420,000 to Apex Solutions. April 3, 2013. $615,000 to Meridian Consulting. The pattern continues for 18 months. Total documented theft: $4,738,000. Marcus had gone from pale to gray. His hands gripped the edge of the table, like a man trying to anchor himself to reality. "This is," he started, but his voice came out strangled. He cleared his throat, tried again. "This is fabricated, doctored evidence. My mother was—" "Your mother," Rachel interrupted, and her voice was harder now, "discovered all of this during the legal battle. She had private investigators, forensic accountants, the same people David works with. She had everything, enough to send you to prison for 10 to 15 years. David pulled up another folder. Email threads, Marcus's name at the top of each one, discussing transfers, approvals, strategies for hiding the money. "These emails were recovered from your personal account," David said. "Eleanor's team had access. They documented everything." Hoffman leaned close to Marcus, whispering urgently. Marcus shook his head, whispered back. Their conversation was too quiet to hear, but Rachel could see the panic in Marcus's eyes, the way his certainty had evaporated like water on hot asphalt. "She could have destroyed you," Rachel said, drawing Marcus's attention back to her. "She could have given all of this to prosecutors, could have watched you go to prison. Instead, she gave you $50 million and hoped you'd change. She gave me that money because she loved you," Rachel cut in. "Despite everything, despite the theft, despite the viciousness of how you fought her, despite the fact that you tried to destroy her reputation and take everything your father had left her, she still loved you. Because you were Richard's son. Because she believed people could change." Rachel leaned forward. "I'm offering you the same thing she did. A second chance. $2 million. You drop the contest, we sign a non-disclosure agreement. And this evidence stays buried. You get to walk away. Start over. Prove that your stepmother's faith in you wasn't completely misplaced." The room was silent except for the hum of the air conditioning and the soft sound of Marcus's breathing. Faster now, shallow. "Or," Rachel continued, her voice dropping, "we give this to the Travis County District Attorney's Office. Today, right now. And you spend the next decade in federal prison explaining to a cellmate how you stole millions from your own family's company." Hoffman leaned close to Marcus again, whispering more urgently now. Marcus's face cycled through emotions. Rage, fear, disbelief, calculation. "You're bluffing," Marcus said, but the words had no conviction. "I'm not," Rachel said simply. Your stepmother taught me a lot about character in the 9 months I knew her. One thing she taught me is that everyone deserves a chance to choose who they want to be. This is your chance. She stood, gathering her things. Crawford and his team followed her lead. We'll give you 24 hours to decide, Crawford said. After that, the evidence goes to prosecutors. Non-negotiable. Rachel walked to the door, then paused, looking back at Marcus. He looked smaller now, diminished, a man whose weapons had been stripped away to reveal the frightened person underneath. $2 million and a fresh start, she said quietly. Or prison. Eleanor gave you a choice once. I'm giving you the same one. Choose better this time. Marcus stood abruptly, his chair scraping back. His hands trembled. Whether from rage or fear, Rachel couldn't tell. You'll regret this, he spat. But the words had no power behind them. They were the reflexive strike of a cornered animal. Hoffman put a hand on his arm, restraining him gently. Marcus, sit down. She can't. She can. Hoffman's voice was firm. And she will. Sit down. Marcus sat, and for the first time since Rachel had met him, he looked like what he was. A middle-aged man who'd burned through every advantage, every gift, every second chance, and had finally run out of road. By the time Rachel reached the parking garage, her phone buzzed. A text from Crawford. Hoffman just called. They'll sign by end of business today. Rachel leaned against her car and let out a breath she felt like she'd been holding for weeks. Eleanor had been right. Everyone deserved a chance to choose, even people who probably didn't deserve it. 6 months later, the sign above the diner read Eleanor's Place, in letters that caught the afternoon sun and threw it back in shades of blue and gold. Rachel had kept everything else almost exactly the same. The red vinyl booths with their cracks and patches, the counter with its squeaky stools, the yellowing photographs of Austin landmarks on the walls. But everything that mattered had changed. The kitchen gleamed with new equipment. A commercial-grade espresso machine replaced the ancient coffee maker that had produced something closer to motor oil than caffeine. The walk-in refrigerator no longer leaked. The stove burners all worked, and the ventilation system actually ventilated instead of just pushing grease-laden air from one corner to another. Phil still managed the place, though his perpetual scowl had softened into something that almost approached contentment. Rachel had given him a 40% raise and health insurance for the first time in his life. He'd cried when she told him, actual tears running down his weathered face, and then tried to hide it by claiming the new ventilation system was making his eyes water. Monica was assistant manager now, with her own set of keys and a salary that meant she could finally move out of her sister's couch. She still rolled her eyes sometimes, but there was affection in it now instead of judgment. Rachel had hired 3 new staff members. Carmen, a single mother who'd been living in her car until Rachel offered her the job and first month's rent on an apartment. James, a veteran with PTSD, who couldn't hold down regular employment but thrived in the diner's structured routine. And Lisa, a former addict 6 months sober, who needed someone to believe she was more than her worst moments. Every Thursday at noon, Rachel worked the floor herself. She wore an apron with Eleanor's Place embroidered on the pocket and poured coffee and took orders and cleared tables. The regular customers had gotten used to the fact that the owner waited tables. Some of them still tried to tip her extra, but she always added it to the staff pool. Sometimes, when the lunch rush died down and the diner fell into its mid-afternoon lull, Rachel sat in booth 7. Eleanor's booth. She'd order chamomile tea and wheat toast, no butter, and sit there remembering a woman in a frayed cardigan who taught her that character mattered more than comfort. The booth had a small brass plaque now, mounted discreetly on the wall, in memory of Eleanor Patterson, who saw people when they were invisible. Rachel traced her fingers over the letters sometimes, feeling the indentations, remembering 9 months of $5 bills and the fortune they bought. The young woman appeared on a Tuesday in late spring, when the Austin heat hadn't yet turned brutal and the air conditioning was more luxury than necessity. She stood in the doorway for a moment, hesitating, as if deciding whether she belonged in a place like this. Rachel noticed her immediately, maybe because she'd been that woman once, standing in doorways, calculating the cost of a meal against the math of survival. Or maybe because Eleanor had taught her to notice. The woman was maybe 23, with dark circles under her eyes that spoke of too many double shifts or too many worries that kept sleep at bay. Her shoes were worn at the heels, reinforced with what looked like super glue along the seams. Her jeans were clean but faded, and her jacket had a small tear in the sleeve she tried to mend with thread that didn't quite match. She chose a booth near the back, away from the windows, and studied the menu with the intense focus of someone doing complex mathematics in her head. When Rachel approached to take her order, the young woman looked up with a smile that tried very hard to hide exhaustion. "Just coffee, please. Black." Rachel wrote it down, noticed the woman's hands. They trembled slightly, from hunger or fatigue or stress. She couldn't tell. "We have a Tuesday special. Eggs and toast, $3. Just a coffee is fine." But the way she said it, the careful politeness masking disappointment, told Rachel everything. Over the next 3 weeks, the pattern held. The young woman came in every Tuesday and Thursday, always ordered coffee, always left exact change. $2.47, counted out in quarters and dimes and pennies from a change purse that looked as worn as her shoes. Rachel watched her the way Eleanor must have watched Rachel, saw the dignity in how she sat, back straight, despite obvious fatigue. Saw the way she made 1 cup of coffee last an hour, rationing the warmth and the caffeine and the brief respite from whatever waited outside. Saw the quiet determination in her eyes, the kind that came from deciding every morning to keep going even when keeping going felt impossible. On the 4th Thursday, Rachel served the coffee herself. She added a muffin to the plate without asking, waved away the woman's protest. "Day old, we'll just throw it out anyway." The woman's eyes filled with tears. She blinked away quickly. "Thank you." When she left, Rachel found the exact change on the table, $2.47, and beside it, the muffin wrapper folded carefully, with a note written on the inside in careful handwriting. "Thank you for seeing me." Rachel stood there, the note in her hand, and something clicked into place. Understanding, finally, what Eleanor had been teaching her all along. The next Thursday, the young woman returned. Same booth, same coffee order, same exact change. When she left, Rachel found the bills and counted them. $2.47. She pulled out a napkin from the dispenser, wrapped a $10 bill inside, left it on the table where the young woman had been sitting. Through the window, Rachel watched her discover it, saw the confusion, then the disbelief, then the tears that came too fast to hide. The young woman looked back at the diner, searching for who had left it. Rachel met her eyes through the glass and smiled. Just smiled. The woman clutched the napkin to her chest and walked away, her shoulders a little straighter, her step a little lighter. Rachel returned to the counter, where Carmen was refilling salt shakers and Monica was counting receipts. "You gave her money again," Monica said. "It wasn't a question." "I did." "She could be scamming you, could be playing the sympathy card." Rachel thought about Eleanor, about 9 months of Thursdays, about the fortune that had come from $5 bills given when $5 was a fortune. "Or she could be drowning, and I just threw her a rope," Rachel said. "And honestly, I'd rather be someone who gets scammed helping people than someone who never helps because they're afraid of being wrong." Monica opened her mouth to argue, then closed it, shook her head, almost smiled. "You're going to go broke being nice to people." Rachel laughed. "I don't think that's how it works." She looked around Eleanor's place at the clean kitchen and the happy staff and the customers who came out just for food, but because they felt welcomed here. She thought about the foundation she'd started, the scholarships she'd funded, the medical bills she'd paid for strangers. Wealth wasn't what you had, she realized. It was what you gave. And kindness wasn't charity. It was recognition. It was seeing someone's humanity when the world had made them invisible. It was choosing over and over to be the person who noticed. Eleanor had taught her that, and now she was teaching someone else. The cycle continued. The Eleanor Patterson Foundation operated out of a modest office on East 6th Street, staffed by people who understood what it meant to need help because they needed it themselves. Rachel had structured it deliberately. No massive overhead, no executive salaries that drained resources meant for people who actually needed them. Scholarships for students who'd had to drop out like she had. Medical debt relief for families drowning in bills they couldn't pay. Small business grants for working-class entrepreneurs who couldn't get traditional loans because their zip codes were wrong or their credit histories told stories of survival rather than success. In 2 years, the foundation had helped 473 people. Rachel knew because she read every application herself, saw every face, learned every story. She'd finished her nursing degree, finally, walking across the stage at Texas State University with her mother in the audience, tears streaming down both their faces. She worked 3 days a week at a community clinic in East Austin, taking patients who couldn't pay, who had no insurance, who came in desperate and left with dignity intact. The Patterson Industries shares generated more money than she could spend. $12,000 a month from the trust fund, plus dividends from the shares, plus the appreciation in property values. The numbers in her bank account climbed faster than she could donate them. So she donated faster. She still lived in her same apartment, though she bought the building and renovated all the units, lowering everyone's rent to something approaching reasonable. She still drove the same car, still wore jeans and t-shirts, still worked at the diner every Thursday. Marcus had moved to California. San Diego, last she'd heard. The $2 million had bought him a condo and a fresh start and maybe, possibly, a chance to be better than he'd been. She didn't know if he'd taken it. Didn't need to know. She'd given him the choice. What he did with it was his burden to carry, not hers. Sometimes, late at night, when sleep wouldn't come, Rachel pulled out Eleanor's letters and read them. All 43 of them, documenting 9 months of observation, each one a testament to the power of paying attention. Her favorite was near the end, dated just 2 weeks before Eleanor died. Money is just a tool, Rachel. What matters is whether you use it to build walls or bridges. I watched you build bridges when you had nothing. Now I'm giving you the resources to build bigger ones. Don't let my son's bitterness teach you the wrong lessons. Let my gratitude teach you the right ones. Character isn't what you do when people are watching. It's what you do when you think no one sees. I saw you, and now the world will too. Rachel folded the letter carefully and returned it to its envelope. The bell above the diner's door chimed. Rachel looked up from behind the counter where she'd been refilling coffee filters. A young man walked in, looking lost and tired and hopeful all at once. His clothes were clean but worn, his shoes held together with duct tape, his eyes carrying the weight of struggles she recognized. He hesitated in the doorway, calculating costs, weighing dignity against hunger. Rachel smiled at him, the kind of smile that said, "You're welcome here. You're seen. You matter. Sit anywhere you'd like," she said. "Can I get you some coffee?" The young man nodded, relief flooding his face. Rachel poured the coffee, set it down gently, and noticed everything. The trembling hands, the medical alert bracelet, the bus schedule in his jacket pocket. She'd been this person once. Eleanor had seen her, and now she saw him. The cycle continued, as it always would, as long as there were people willing to notice, willing to give, willing to be the person someone else needed them to be. Outside, South Congress Avenue hummed with afternoon traffic. Inside Eleanor's place, the smell of fresh coffee mixed with the promise of something warmer than food. Rachel topped off the young man's cup without being asked and returned to the counter, ready to notice, ready to give, ready to be the person Eleanor had seen in her all along. The bell above the door chimed again.